What if the chair you reach for when no one is watching quietly predicts how you will handle the hardest week of your life? Keep that image in mind, because by the end of this film, you will know how a single attraction towards stillness, order, status, flamboyance, or armor maps to a Stoic discipline that can change how you suffer, how you love, and how you lead. Leave the chair where it is for now. We will return to it at the end, and you'll test yourself again with different eyes. Before we begin, a small and humane disclaimer. Everything you're about to hear is educational philosophy, not personal or clinical advice. The Stoics give us tools, not prescriptions. Use them with care, adapt them to your life, and consult qualified sources when you face complex decisions in health, law, or relationships. Wisdom respects limits. People often meet Stoicism at the level of slogans: be calm, don't care, harden up, and then walk away thinking it's a manual for becoming less human. The truth is stranger and kinder. Stoicism teaches that our most human faculties, reason, imagination, affection, are meant to govern our choices so that our lives become aligned with nature's order and our own best character. The discipline is not to feel less, but to mistake less, to stop granting every passing impression the prestige of a fact. A bright object on a website is not a need. A harsh word is not a verdict. A sudden fear is not an oracle. In Stoic language, impressions arrive. Our value judgments either bless or tame them. If you understand that hinge, you understand the door to freedom. Now return to the chairs. The original experiment speaks in Jungian terms: archetypes, shadows, the child, the warrior, and that language is useful as metaphor. But the Stoic frame asks a different question. What is the judgment beneath the attraction? Which value are you smuggling into your choice without noticing? A simple preference can reveal a moral habit, and a moral habit pilots a life. The chair you find irresistible may be pointing a finger toward your habitual strategy for safety. A strategy that once served you can become a quiet tyrant. The task of philosophy is to notice the tyrant while it still smiles. Imagine 5 currents under the surface of choice: a current toward quiet, a current toward rules, a current toward authority, a current toward color, and a current toward armor. We can borrow those labels for a moment: the observer, the guardian, the king, the child, the warrior, but we won't freeze them into identity. The Stoic refuses to let any single posture become a prison. Instead, we examine the judgment hidden inside the posture, and we practice another posture on purpose until we become capable of more than one life. Take the current toward quiet. You gravitate toward the chair that promises relief from noise. Soft lines, simple wood, a whisper of order. You are not wrong to love it. The soul needs silence to think. The mind needs a clear table to write a wise sentence. But if the attraction is not only aesthetic, if it's salvation, then perhaps the judgment below it reads like this: if I keep things calm, I will be safe. If I withdraw, I cannot be hurt. Stoicism recognizes the value of retreat. Marcus wrote in a war camp and called his mind an inner citadel. But the citadel is not a cave. It is a place from which you re-enter the world with better aims. The discipline here is to practice voluntary contact. Do not expose yourself to chaos recklessly. Instead, schedule small doses of social complexity and train your nervous system to tell the truth. This is uncomfortable, not dangerous. The chair taught you what you love. Now practice not being owned by it. A story makes this clear. Lena is an architect who built beautiful rooms for clients and a fortress for herself. She chose the quiet chair in every sense. Neat routines, stainless kitchen, headphones instead of friends. For a season, it worked. Her designs flourished. Then a preventable downfall arrived. A project needed collaboration with a messy but brilliant engineer, and Lena could not bear his whiteboards, his improvisations, his laughter that arrived before 9 a.m. She withdrew from meetings, responded only by email, and the project sank under miscommunication. It would be easy to moralize, but the Stoic does something more useful: trace the judgment. Lena's judgment was that disorder equals danger, that the presence of another mind in her sanctuary was a contamination. Wrong judgment, wrong outcome. She practiced a corrective not by abandoning her nature, but by training a different muscle. Every Tuesday, she scheduled a 90-minute working session with the engineer in a neutral space. Before each session, she wrote a single line in her notebook: "Impressions are not verdicts." She also gave herself a 5-minute ritual afterward to restore quiet. Over a season, her fear of the whiteboard fell from alarm to background noise. The project recovered. That is the Stoic way. Precision about cause. Practice about cure. Mercy about timing. Shift the lens to the current toward rules. The sturdy, symmetrical chair feels like a promise kept. We recognize ourselves here when life has taught us that clarity prevents pain. Rituals, plans, standards, these are not shackles, they are scaffolds. The danger arrives when the scaffold becomes a shrine. The hidden judgment might be, if the framework holds, I will not fall. Stoicism honors structure, daily reviews, morning premeditation of challenges, evening audits of conduct. But it also defends the living principle behind the routine. When a rule remains after its reason has died, it becomes superstition. The discipline is to test the rule against the role against reason, and the whole against nature. You keep the frame that serves the function and drop the rest without drama. This is where Aaron enters, and with him, the delayed awakening that took too long and hurt more than it needed to. He managed a hospital logistics team. He was revered for his schedules and feared for his escalations. When a storm collapsed a supply chain, Aaron held the line so hard that nurses improvised without telling him. He discovered the end run too late, and the shame stung him into withdrawal. For months, he doubled down on the only tool he trusted: tighter rules. He burned out 2 coordinators and lost the goodwill of a ward. Then came a gentle intervention from a mentor who had read more philosophy than medicine. She asked him 2 questions that belong on a Stoic's desk. What function is your rule serving today? And which part of this is under your control? Aaron began to distinguish between principles: no patient should wait for a preventable supply failure, and procedures: this spreadsheet must be filled by noon. The principle stayed sacred. The procedure became negotiable. He learned to build a plan that assumed human irregularity, to invite nurses into the schedule, to update the spreadsheet rule when the day asked for it. The delayed awakening was not spectacular. It was dignified. He replaced the judgment, "rules prevent shame," with "reason prevents harm." The storm season returned. The ward hummed, not because the chair was sturdy, but because the judgment was sound. Now to the current toward authority. The leather armchair calls to the part of us that wants to feel complete, to stop hustling for validation, because the room itself confers it. Status is not evil. Responsibility requires power. Leadership is a form of care. But the judgment beneath the craving can curdle into "if I'm in charge, I'm safe," which is simply a myth. The Stoic stance on power is ruthless and liberating. Power belongs to the realm of preferred indifferent, useful when available, irrelevant to virtue. The good you can always do does not depend on rank. Justice in decisions, courage in speech, temperance in appetite, wisdom in counsel. If your love of the armchair is a love of rest from the burden of proving yourself, then the discipline is to step off the throne internally, even while you sit in the chair externally. Practice decisions that make you less central and the mission more so. Teach others how to carry weight. Do not confuse visibility with worth. Here we meet Marco, a founder who looked like the stereotype: precise haircut, decisive handshake, a calendar crowded with urgency. He did not seek wealth merely for pleasure. He wanted control, because control felt like immunity. The preventable downfall visited him twice in smaller forms. A toxic hire he kept because elimination would reveal he was wrong. A product feature he pushed because retreat would bruise his pride. Then once in a larger form, when a funding round evaporated. The leather armchair could not hold him. No chair could. What saved him was not a hack, but a frame. He learned a Stoic sentence that is simple to say and expensive to live. Success is lending your character to the role. Failure is borrowing your identity from the role. He sent 3 emails that week, changing everything. A public post-mortem that named his errors without spectacle. A notice to the team that his COO would lead product for a quarter, and a calendar update dedicating 2 mornings a week to one-on-ones without agenda. He did not become weak. He became specific. The power he wanted, freedom from the performance of power, arrived only when he gave power away. The judgment shifted from "I must be central" to "I must be useful." Later, when funding returned, he took the same chair but sat in it differently. That is a transformation, not of furniture, but of meaning. Color now, and the current toward imagination. The playful chair flashes, the room brightens, and a childlike part of the mind says yes before the adult can vote. Some will call it immaturity. The Stoic will call it energy in need of aim. Joy, wonder, artistry. These are compatible with discipline. The hidden judgment to examine is, if I express myself loudly, I will not be unseen. The danger is not creativity, but performance as camouflage. You do not need to wear a costume if your voice tells the truth. Stoic practice here is not to dim yourself. It is to anchor your light in service. Ask, what is this brightness for? When play becomes craft and craft becomes contribution, the color stops pleading for permission and starts fulfilling a role. This is Maze Terrain, a composite of 2 painters and 1 product designer whose stories rhyme. May's childhood was filled with chore charts and muted tones. When she escaped, she overcorrected. Neon hair, maximalist rooms, a calendar of gallery nights with work always just about to begin. The delayed awakening came the day she admitted that constant novelty was her way to evade a harder devotion. She loved starting, because starting always glowed. Finishing is quieter and therefore lonelier. She tried a Stoic experiment that sounds ridiculous until you watch it reorder a life. For 90 days, she promised herself an hour each morning on one piece, before scroll and without playlist. And at the end of each hour, She sent a photo to one friend with one sentence naming what improved. She blunted the thrill of constant beginnings and discovered the deeper thrill of depth. Her hair stayed neon. Her work changed temperature. She could still choose the bright chair, but the judgment turned from, "Look at me so I won't vanish," to, "I will make something that serves the world, even if no one looks." The last current runs toward armor. The stripped-down chair of metal and wood holds a vow: survive. If you choose it, perhaps you learn to be strong younger than your peers, and that competence became your sedative, your shield, your pride. The Stoic has no quarrel with strength. Endurance is a virtue's ally. But the judgment worth testing is, if I stay hard, I cannot be broken, which mistakes numbness for resilience. Stoicism distinguishes between toughness and fortitude. Toughness is brittle. It refuses pain until the pressure exceeds its capacity, and then it snaps. Fortitude feels pain and tells the truth about it. It bleeds in the service of something chosen. It rests when rest preserves mission. If the armored chair is your haven, practice softness under conditions you can control. The aim is not to dismantle your defenses, but to learn their door handle. Aurelius illustrates the transformation arc that works. He served in a profession that rewarded stoicism in the popular sense: face like rock, eyes like rumorless water, schedule like iron. When his father died, he did precisely what he had trained. He executed the checklist and returned to his desk. Over the months, his appetite rusted, his sleep thinned, and his words turned tactical. His friends heard the signal beneath the radio silence and offered company that he refused. Then one morning, he did something that looked small. He made coffee for himself and for no mission, sat on the floor, and said aloud, "I miss you." He did not break. The days that followed were not glamorous, but he adopted two practices with religious respect: a daily 15-minute walk without phone in which he rehearsed 3 truths. This hurts. This is not forever. This is mine to carry. And a weekly dinner with one person where he was forbidden from asking follow-up questions until he had answered, "How are you?" in a sentence that contained a feeling word. In 6 months, the armor learned hinge. In a year, the hinge learned grace. He kept strength. He exiled denial. The chair of metal and wood remained in the room, but he no longer worshipped it. If you listen carefully across these currents, you can hear the Stoic score. Again and again the melody returns. Impressions are not verdicts. Judgments are chosen. Character is trained. Whenever you are tempted to make an altar out of a coping style, quiet, rules, status, color, armor, ask 2 questions. Does this serve the role I am in today? Does this align with the virtues that do not expire? The Stoics name 4 such virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. In plain English, clear seeing, fair dealing, brave acting, measured wanting. Every chair can be sat in with these 4 alive, and every chair can be abused so that all 4 are starved. The difference is not in the wood and leather, it is in the meaning you supply. The misunderstanding that blocks most of us from using this philosophy is the notion that Stoicism is about emotionlessness. The ancient sources, so often quoted, so rarely read in context, do not ask you to amputate your feelings. They ask you to refuse their tyranny. When fear arrives, you classify it: signal or storm. When grief arrives, you honor it, love leaving a shape behind. When anger arrives, you interrogate it. Which expectation was violated, and was the expectation just? The discipline is sober, not sterile. It pairs beautifully with modern insights about nervous systems and trauma without pretending to replace them. In fact, the Stoic emphasis on working with impressions maps neatly to what therapists teach about cognitive distortions and what body workers teach about embodied stress. Philosophy does not compete with healing. It complements it by giving you a frame for action when your feelings surge. Let's gather the threads into 3 arcs as promised: the preventable downfall, the delayed awakening, the transformation that held. You saw Lena's isolation strategy sabotage a collaboration and learned how small, repeatable exposures can reform a nervous system's myths. You watched Aaron defend rules until rules devoured the purpose they were meant to defend. And you saw him recover by distinguishing principle from procedure and control from responsibility. You walked with Elias as armor learned to open, and you felt how grief metabolized into capacity instead of calcifying into a mask. These arcs rhyme because life rhymes. Most tragedies are not bolts from above, but echoes of a judgment repeated too long. When you learn to change the judgment, the echo decays. It is time to open the loop we set in the first minute. We said the chair you choose might predict how you handle the hardest week of your life. Here's the payoff and the test. Choose the same chair again in your mind or in your room, and without flattering yourself or scolding yourself, name the judgment it represents for you today. Then perform a counter practice this week that is small enough to keep and strong enough to move the needle. If your chair is quiet, schedule contact with one unpredictable human and promise to stay present through your first impulse to retreat. If your chair is structure, leave 1 square inch on your schedule blank each day and treat it as sacred room for reality to knock. If your chair is authority, delegate one decision that touches your pride and accept the outcome without revisionist interference. If your chair is color, complete one thing to done even after the glow fades and tell no one until it is finished. If your chair is armor, say one true sentence that contains a feeling word to someone who has earned your trust. None of this is magic. All of this is medicine. We should also confront a final misconception, that Stoicism is solitary. Yes, the ancients write as if to themselves, but always with the city in mind. The point of personal virtue is social benefit. Your steady judgment reduces useless noise in the common life. Your courage shortens someone else's suffering. Your temperance adds oxygen back to suffocating rooms. Even your joy, properly aimed, fortifies another person's will to continue. When you practice on your chair, you are not perfecting a private ritual. You are rehearsing your role in a world that needs adults. There is one more scene I want you to carry away, a small one, almost invisible. Imagine a sailor trimming a sheet in variable wind. If you watch his hands, you'll be bored. If you feel with him, you'll learn. Each adjustment is not dramatic, but each one prevents drift. This is Stoic practice. You will not become another person tomorrow. You will adjust a judgment. You will straighten a habit. You will notice the temptation to worship the chair, and you will smile at your own mind. You will develop a personal liturgy, morning recollection, noon recalibration, evening review, that is lighter than culture war slogans and heavier than self-help slogans. Your life, bit by bit, will move from being lived at the mercy of moods to being steered by chosen meanings. Some of you will ask for doctrines and quotes and footnotes. There is time for that. It is useful to know who wrote what, when, and why. It is honorable to distinguish ancient voices from modern redescriptions. But for today, the thing to remember is this: philosophies are not collections of sentences. They are training programs for perception. The training begins the instant you notice that you have a choice about what things mean. The chair does not promise salvation. It invites an experiment. You can love quiet and still be brave. You can cherish rules and still be gentle. You can sit in a seat of power and still kneel to truth. You can dance in color and still keep your word. You can wear armor and still learn the grammar of tenderness. The phrase "still be" is the difference between a personality and a person. If you have traveled with me this far, you have already done something many never attempt. You have examined your attractions without apology. The world will always try to sell you a new chair. Let it. You are not for sale. Practice the judgment that cannot be bought, the conviction that virtue is the only reliable good, that living in accordance with reason and nature is the only reliable path, and that everything else, applause, silence, shine, steel, is material to be used, not idols to be feared. In the next chapter of this learning journey, we will put a finer edge on one of the most powerful Stoic exercises, the view from above. It will show you how to widen your lens when panic narrows it, how to right-size a crisis without denying its pain, and how to return to the ground carrying perspective like a lantern. If today's work was about decoding the lure of the chair, tomorrow's work is about standing up from it and seeing your life in a scale that makes courage possible. For now, sit for one more minute, breathe as if you owed yourself a gentleness long withheld, and ask, what meaning did I just add to this moment? And is it worthy of the person I am becoming?